Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to INSS English Podcast. What is the role of truth in our time? What is the role of historical facts? How much can distorted narratives of the past affect and even determine what our generation and the ones to follow know about the past? These questions seem to get more and more center of political, social, and academic debates in many countries. Each country has, of course, its own national, social, and historical context, but the core always stays the same. The place of truth, of facts that cannot be questioned, is weakening. One of the places this disturbing process takes place is Poland. In recent years, an increasing debate regarding the role of Holocaust memory and the crimes committed by parts of Polish society against their Polish Jewish neighbors during World War II has managed to enter mainstream public discourse. What used to be in the margins of social debate received now the center of attention, attention which was translated later on into laws. In 2018, it became illegal in Poland to accuse the country of complicity with Nazi crimes. This ongoing debate reached new, dangerous peaks only 2 weeks ago, in the middle of a public lecture of Poland's leading Holocaust historian, Professor Jan Grabowski. On the evening of May 30th, Professor Grabowski's lecture was brutally interrupted by a member of the Confederation Party in the Polish government, whose aim was to defend what he called as Poland's good name against Grabowski's so-called historical propaganda, as he said. Professor Grabowski was supposed to speak about the responsibility of Polish crimes against Jews during the Holocaust. However, due to this violent disruption of the lecture, which could have easily escalated further to a much dangerous situation, the voice of the historical truth was silenced. Silenced, but only for a short while. We at the Institute for National Security Studies are very fortunate to have Professor Jan Grabowski with us today to shed some light on what exactly happened on that evening and what is happening in Poland in recent years, where historians can no longer feel free and safe to raise their voice, the voice of the historical truth, and are subject to threats, even death threats, from extreme right-wing politicians and their followers. Crimes of the past in Poland's contemporary public discourse. We begin right after this. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to INSS English Podcast, today dedicated to the subject of Holocaust memory in contemporary Poland. My name is Adi Kantor, and joining me today via Zoom is Professor Jan Grabowski, Professor of History in the University of Ottawa, a leading scholar in Holocaust research and Holocaust memory in Poland. His research includes the issues surrounding the extermination of Polish Jews, as well as history of Polish-Jewish relations during 1939 to 1945 period. He is author of several monographs, including Hunt for the Jews, Betrayal and Murder in German-occupied Poland, which won the Yad Vashem International Book Prize for 2014, and also Night Without End, The Fate of Jews in Selected Countries of Occupied Poland, co-authored with Professor Barbara Engelkind in 2018. And really lately, in 2023, Grabowski, along with historian Shira Klein, published an article in the Journal of Holocaust Research, which stated that Wikipedia spreads misinformation about the history of Jews in Poland. So many important studies which are an invitation and also a wake-up call to all of us to dig deep into them and discover some very hard truths which were put in the dark for too long and deserve a lot more scholarly and public attention. Professor Jan Grabowski, thank you so much for joining me on this important podcast. This is really an honor for all of us here at the INSS to host you today via Zoom. Hello to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello to you from Sweden. And it's my honor too to be with you. And thank you for these kind words that you just said. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am also very much looking forward, and you definitely deserve all of the words that I said and a lot more. So I think it would be, Jan, it would be a good idea to start our conversation today. You know, we have so many subjects and so little time to discuss all, but I think it would be really a good idea to start with what happened. What happened 2 weeks ago in your lecture in the German Historical Institute in Warsaw, which was brutally, violently interrupted by a politician, government politician from the right-wing party. Maybe you can elaborate on, first of all, to say what was the title of your lecture, what was supposed to be about, and what happened in your voice.
Well, thank you for this invitation, for the question. So, just to give you a little bit of a background here, a few sentences. This invitation came from German Historical Institute in Warsaw, which is an academic institution, and from the Institute of History at the University of Warsaw, and several months ago. And I was scheduled to give a talk about, to translate from Polish, Polish growing problems with the history of the Holocaust. In other words, I wanted to talk about Poland's and Polish society's obvious and apparent inability to come to terms with the history of the Holocaust. And the problem becomes, I would argue, increasingly important with the flow of time. I have been teaching, I have been an academic teacher, professor of history for more than 30 years at this stage. And I must tell you, I have never experienced anything like it. I mean, unfortunately, the atmosphere surrounding the lecture was quite hot, and there was a wave of hate being created by state-sponsored and state-owned media, TV, radio, and so on. I didn't really pay much attention because it happened in the past, but I saw that there were numerous, media outlets getting on this action, so to say. So the atmosphere was overheated, and I was even very, very appalled to see that a middle of the stream Catholic weekly, Tygodnik Powszechny, very respectable newspaper, joined in their criticism of me. In any case, I came to this lecture not having any idea what would happen. And then, despite my 30 plus years of experience, I was not prepared to confront physical violence. I mean, this is one thing to have hecklers in the room. That happened to me sometimes. Not in academic setting, mind you, in open lectures. So hecklers who appear out of nowhere in your discussion period. But here I have a raging bully standing up, a member of Polish parliament, who charges to the podium after about 10 minutes of I barely was able to finish my introduction to the lecture. And he charged the podium. He grabbed the microphone and he repeatedly smashed this heavy metal iron microphone on the podium in front of my face. Then he rushed to the screaming obscenities. He rushed to the loudspeakers, overturning loudspeakers, preventing me from talking. It was mayhem, and I could see students from Warsaw University who came to attend being visibly shocked, frightened, traumatized. With this, I was not prepared. I was not digesting this situation, not comprehending it. So it was mayhem, and it took several days for this information to trickle. So this is basically what happened. Of course, the background is something quite different, right?
The lecture was what it was supposed to be. You were supposed to hold the lecture on Polish society in relation to the crimes during the Holocaust, right? And this was the subject of the lecture.
Well, the subject was exactly memory, the inability to come to terms with the memory in Poland, with the memory of the Holocaust. And the lecture that I was unable to give was basically to show the people that it's not, last few years of this nationalistic overdrive, if I can use the expression, but that the foundations for this outrage, for the violence, have been laid a long time ago.
And I think, first of all, thank you for sharing this with us. I think another thing that was shocking also to me when I first heard about the event is the fact that you had to leave the hall, and also the audience that came to listen to you had to leave the hall, and he stayed there and claimed that nobody can get him out, even not the Polish police. I'm very interested to know what were the reactions. What were the reactions of Polish police? You said that there were media there were cameras there. I mean, a person goes on the stage and silences you and what you're about to say, and in a way, nothing happens. And actually, it's a whole, everything is turned around. You were supposed to get outside, and he was allowed to stay. How can we explain something like this?
It was actually a sign, not of hopelessness of the Polish state, of complicity of the Polish state. What you have is it took the police who were present on the premises because they had been warned that there was trouble in brewing. It took them about 10 minutes, and they never...
Which is too long, of course.
I mean, this is way too long, because in this time, he just as easily, this individual could have smashed this microphone over my head, right? At this stage, I was not prepared to offer physical resistance. It's something that we as scholars of the Holocaust have to discuss. What do we do when confronted with not any longer with words of hate, which Polish government has been using for a long time, but with violence, outright physical violence. Yes. I mean, had I held onto the microphone, well, it would come to blows. What do you do, right? Do you confront physically? Now, the police arrived, and they were visibly intimidated by the fact that he is who he is. He represents actually the power, okay? He is not a member of the government, but he is, let's say, people like this individual have been funded richly by the government, and this movement, this ultra nationalistic right has been built up with the public funds. So these policemen are not stupid. They know from where the wind is blowing. Yes. They refuse to act at all. So basically, I, with a group of scholars and students, we were evacuated actually into another floor. And of course, I refused.
Which is a scandal. It's a scandal. It's a scandal.
Beyond belief. I mean, this happens. It's not a rally. It's not a public, let's say, lecture in the open. It is an academic lecture for academic audience. This is what makes it so more appalling, because this is our turf, our little piece of land which we have left in Poland still.
Exactly.
You are not looking for confrontation. You are looking to deliver an academic lecture, and this is what happens.
And to provide knowledge, which is the role of historian, right? To make knowledge accessible for the public. And I think it would be fair to say that it reached new scale in Poland. Researchers like you and myself, we because we study this and because we are into this, we know these phenomena can happen, but the scale it reached and the new, I think, dimension it reached, that it came to really violent act. I really think this is a new scale in Poland. And now we're going now from the micro to the macro, Jan, and I really, to talk about the phenomenon itself. And what I think the next question would be, how much do you think the Polish discourse, we're trying now to go really more on a macro level, how much is the nationalistic Polish discourse regarding the past, regarding crimes of the past with regards to Holocaust, how much is it unique or different from other national discourses that we see in Europe today? We see what is happening in Hungary, in Eastern Europe, but I don't think it's really only a phenomenon in Eastern Europe. We see it also in West and West Central European countries, just maybe in a different way. But we see it as well. Distortion, misinformation, and violence. I mean, this is really now in connection to violence. Is there any uniqueness or a difference that you see in the Polish discourse?
Look, thank you for this. I mean, the thing is that what happens in Poland is not unique to Poland, because similar echoes, as you mentioned, you can find in Hungary, you can find Lithuania, you can find disturbing things in Romania. So it's, in Croatia. So these things pop up here and there. Yeah. The main difference is that is the scale of this distortion, falsification. Let's call it simply attack on history of the Shoah, attack on the history of the Holocaust. Now, in Poland, it is central. It is one of the central messages of the government in terms of identity politics. And this is what makes it very different from all the other jurisdictions. And second, it is state-funded on a scale which we have, as historians, we have not seen, okay? The Polish state commits resources which are beyond belief. We are talking one only institution is getting an equivalent of 100 million euros per year or $120 million. One only institution which is deeply involved in this falsification of history. So what makes Polish case so different is, first of all, Poland is a custodian of the memory of the Holocaust, right? That's where the Holocaust happened.
Yeah.
That's where 5 out of 6 million Jews have been put to death.
Yeah.
So it's not Croatia, it's not Hungary, it's not any other country. This is the custodian of memory. And second, its centrality of the Holocaust in the falsifying message. Third, the power of the state resources committed to the destruction of the history of the Holocaust, if you know what I mean. So that's what makes it. And perhaps point number 4 is how well it resonates within the Polish society. This message actually gets digested, is being somehow adopted by, I would say, vast majority of the Polish society, which makes it so pervasive and so dangerous to combat.
And this, thank you very much for this. This really brings us now to my next question. When would you say that the discourse in Poland began to shift? Are we witnessing a new phenomenon? Are we witnessing something new in the discourse? Or rather, it was always there for decades, but more in the margins, and now it's in the center. When did it all start? I'm not sure we're witnessing a new phenomenon. I think it began a long time ago, but it receives attention. When was this shift, Jan?
The thing is that I don't want even to split hairs here, but I would say that as soon as the war was over, in Poland, the attempts have been, after the Kielce pogrom of July 1946, there was a very, very systematic effort to say that, look, it's a Soviet provocation. We would have never done it. Aberration. So the lack of this refusal to acknowledge that Holocaust in Poland was the most complete Holocaust of all. 1% of Polish Jews survived. Imagine 1%, 1 out of 100 of Jews who were under the German occupation made it until the liberation. And some part of this horrible number went to the participation of Polish society in the destruction of their Jewish neighbors. So the inability to deal with it lasted under communes, I would say, throughout the post-war period. It simply increased now dramatically in the 21st century due to several issues of factors. The thing is that if you look at this case of so-called defense of the good name of the nation, which is absurd notion, because the only way to defend the good name of your nation is simply to openly confront the ghosts of the past, right? Not by lying about them. So here you have this situation when the left and the right and the center meet together. When you look at the votes in Polish parliament about those silly laws, about bills, about Polish Holocaust law of 2018, there were 4 out of 460 members of parliament, 4 voted against. Okay, so this gives you an idea what is going on. Now, if you look at for me, this element of this common front of denial was a letter published in 2015 in April. It's still long before the nationalists seized power or won the elections. So imagine a letter signed in 2015 in April by the directors of Polish museums of memory, including the director of Auschwitz Museum, including the director of Polin Museum, denouncing the words of director of FBI Comey, who simply said that that civilian populations, including Polish and Hungarian and German, took part in the Holocaust, which is entirely true. So you have this huge outburst of anger on the part of the directors of Polish museums of memory, including museums charged with becoming custodians of Jewish, let's say, catastrophe. So something broke in Polish society, including these, let's say, all parts of the political spectrum. So this is actually something I wanted to discuss in my lecture, which did not happen.
And this is exactly you touched. I think the hardcore of what is so hard for people to listen in Poland. This is what we witnessed 2 weeks ago. He literally went onto the podium and tried at least to silence you. But I think this attempt. I think it was. it was not successful, and we are
At the
we are
time,
talking with you today.
For a moment it was.
Yes,
for a moment. And
yeah.
It leaves once again, just to briefly go back to it. The thing is that next time, if I have a public appearance in Poland, can I do it? It's not a question of my safety. I care less about my own safety, but it's the safety of my audience which is at stake, right? Can I guarantee their safety? So in a way, he won here. Yeah.
This is very disturbing, what we're discussing here. And another question that I have, I think it's interesting. There are many discourses. There's a public discourse, national discourse. There's also a family discourse. Is it one-to-one in Poland? What is happening inside the Polish family with regards to coping with crimes of the past, or uncoping with crimes of the past, and what we see on the street? Is it because I'm a researcher of Germany. I think in Germany it's really the other way around. I mean, on the outside, on the streets, you see so-called the coping with the crimes of the past. But when you go into the German family, you see exactly the opposite of it. You see a lot of denials. You see a lot of distortions. You see a lot of lies and silence, a lot of silence with regards to certain issues that are very uncomfortable. And my question is, do you see the same in Poland? But I think in Poland it's not the same, because what we see in the family, it's actually what we see outside.
Actually, the thing is that you have to understand that there is a huge, tremendous difference between Poland and most of other European countries. And this is because, indeed, ethnically construed Polish society has been a victim
of course,
violence, occupation, and terror. Mm-hmm. So in each and every family, there will be a history, practically, I would say, a history of, great-grandfather, grandfather, grandmother, who were somehow either sent to Germany for slave labor, or murdered in horrible, mass reprisals, mass shootings, you name it. I mean, 1.8 million ethnic Poles also died during the war. So there is more than enough of, let's say, martyrdom material to fuel.
No doubt.
Family, let's say, accounts. And there is very little, when you have a society such as Polish one, which is brought up in a tradition of its own martyrdom, there is very little room for compassion and absolutely for others, and absolutely no room for recognition of your own groups or societies' guilts or crimes against even more feeble or more victimized part of Polish society, which were the Polish Jews. What you can do is you have to act. You have to look in a very pointed way at certain families, even where that horrible things have happened. So when I follow, for instance, court documents from wartime, from late 1940s too, and I go actually to villages or to places where I know that the violence against the Jews has been perpetrated by the locals, then if you have the names and you start probing, horrifying things come up, because the memory of Polish violence against the Jews is very much alive, but it's under layers of own martyrdom.
Exactly.
So when you start probing, and I do it often, then the reactions you get, but this is a theme for another discussion. So by and large, you have this own victim status dominating the internal discourse, and that's what makes this propaganda so efficient, because it plays along the same lines.
And this, you say, is a common denominator between left, right, and center? I mean, when we're talking about the opposers of this, of the lecture, who would be the ones who would oppose what you wanted to say? You say, I thought it was more right-wing, extreme right-wingers, but it's actually, you say,
I can give you an
everywhere.
Example. A couple of weeks ago, actually on the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the prime minister started a vicious campaign against Polish scholars involved in a study of the Holocaust. Polish Minister of Education went much even further, trying to blackmail institutes, employing these historians as something completely impossible to even imagine from Western perspective, let's say democratic perspective. Now, do you know that there was not even one Polish democratic opposition politician who came out in support of independent historians? Not even one, because good Democrats, who simply assume that any kind of public support for scholars of the Holocaust is a politically losing propositions, and elections are on the horizon in October, right? Possibly. So this shows to you how this united front of defense of falsely construed defense of the good name of the nation works so efficient.
This is unbelievable. This is really astonishing what you're telling us, and it's so important to talk about it. How do you think this affects Polish-Israeli relations? We just in 2018 we were introduced to this so-called Holocaust law, and now the renewal of the agreement of Israeli schools to visit Poland, to visit the former concentration campsites and death campsites. There are a few conditions for Israeli schools now to visit Poland. They need to visit also other sites, national Polish sites, that are very questionable. What is your view on this, Jan?
I mean, it's depressing, okay, because the state of Israel has its own policies, which I am not even, delving in. It's not I'm a historian, not a politician. However, I am at the receiving end. For instance, once the Israeli prime minister in 2018 signs a deal with Polish prime minister in which he recognizes that anti-Semitism is equal to anti-Polonism. Well, I'm sorry, this is nonsense, because anti-Polonism is a conspiracy theory. It doesn't exist, okay? To make it, so we, the scholars working in the Holocaust, let's say, with Holocaust in Poland, then we are confronted with stern accusations of anti-Polonism recognized by the state of Israel as equal to anti-Semitism. Now here with these trips, unfortunately, one more accord, Israeli government apparently willing to seek let's say, understanding with Polish government, which is very on diplomatic level pro-Israeli. They understand each other fairly well. The Israeli government signed a deal which suggests as legitimate to visit for Israeli youth museums, among many Polish museums, among them so-called museums devoted to the memory of cursed soldiers. Now, cursed soldiers were anti-communist warriors or members of anti-communist underground who, after 1945, remained in, let's say, underground, and they kept fighting communists. Now, everything is here okay. The problem is that these people were fighting communists, and the way they very often understood communism is Jews. Sure. Jews are communists, Judeo-commune, these tropes. And so many of these so-called cursed soldiers were vicious murderers of Jewish survivors of the Holocaust, including members of my immediate family. So, it's personal. It's hard to see State of Israel sign off on these museums as legitimate museums to be visited by Israeli youth is simply a slap on the face. Yeah, I mean, I cannot even try to understand.
I share definitely your views on this. Before we dive into what can be done, because this is also another thing that we are occupied with, the problem is clear. The problems and the challenges are clear. But now, I mean, it doesn't end there. I mean, your recent study was on Wikipedia and the misinformation that we as users of internet, as our audience also and listeners of this podcast, go into Wikipedia, and what we read there is false.
Well, I was baffled because not that I use all that much. I mean, always when you open a computer, the first hit you get is the Wikipedia, right? The most used website, one of the most used websites in the world. So I was confronted by my students a couple of years ago who told me that, Professor Grabowski, we are reading in our textbook here certain things which are not exactly, corresponding with what we find online. And Friedlander must have gotten something wrong. So I said, I don't think Friedlander got it wrong, but I started to check up, and I found to my horror that things dealing with Polish-Jewish relations during the Holocaust, very thin part of the history of the Holocaust, has been really distorted it read as if it were written by the Polish officials, So I got together with Professor Shira Klein who is a specialist in digital media. I didn't know what's the kitchen, how it's being cooked, right? I saw the results. So I was talking in the article, about all these tropes, cliches, distortions, And Professor Klein explained how a small group, actually, of Polish nationalists was able, with senior status among the Wikipedia editors, mind you, knowing how to game the system, how to play the system, internal system of Wikipedia, presented millions and literally millions of readers with a deeply distorted version of history, for instance, which would claim that Jews are complicit in their own catastrophe during the war, that the Polish society was out there only to help, about the Judeo commune being this, great problem. I mean, so many things. And we were able to show that it doesn't take a legion of people, not a division of falsifiers. It is a small group of devoted, ideologically, bent people. And then I came across the leaked correspondence of Polish Prime Minister and his advisors, who entertained the idea of doing this kind of work, but sponsored by Polish state money. So we have to be aware that we are living in on all sides, a dangerous period of time. From the point of view of the memory of the Holocaust, this is a memory under siege.
It's clear that the past is being questioned now. Historical facts are being questioned. We saw it in various fields. We saw it in your lecture, for example, 2 weeks ago. We see it in the agreements between Poland and Israel. We see it in the public discourse, in the media, in the social media. As historian of the Holocaust, where do you think would be the right place to start fighting? Where would you start? Where do you see the most dangerous problem? In the social media, in historical textbooks, in public discourse? Where would you start tackling this problem?
That's a large question. One thing, maybe I will tell you right away, is that you have to split the thing between things going on in Poland, inside Poland, and outside Poland, right? There is little we can do as outsiders, let's say foreigners, and I'm here in my Canadian hat.
Yeah.
We can do little in terms of, we can do something, but not so much. But the first thing in Poland is that, historians have been working full time on, in an independent way, on the history of the Holocaust for the last, decades and decades, and not even a word of it trickled to Polish school programs.
Unbelievable.
But the thing is that even if you have democratic regime, not these nationalists like now, but even if you have a democratic regime, they did nothing we talked about why, right? Because they are generally on the same side of this defending the good name equation. So one thing is that as long as Polish school curricula reflect this deeply falsified version of history, on the inside, little is to be done. What we can do on the outside is be very vigilant. Whenever you see people from the Institute of National Remembrance or Pilecki Institute or any other organization funded by the Polish state coming with, optimistic messages of, Holocaust history tailored to their needs, confront them. Do not admit them. Do not engage them, rather, in a open way. Creating, I think the important thing will be to create financially secure spaces for young scholars, let's say PhDs, even MAs, who are now prevented from doing this kind of research. Perhaps they can go to Yad Vashem, perhaps they can go to Tel Aviv University, perhaps they can go to to my own university in Ottawa, creating those hubs of Holocaust memory, where people can actually work on these issues to preserve the memory.
Without being threatened. Without being...
No, the thing is, not even threat, not even open threat. The thing is, I was now in Warsaw 2 weeks ago, and after my lecture, the couple of students came to me that they really wanted to do this topic and that topic, but they won't do it because they are thinking about a PhD and a career, and of course they won't get funding for it, right? And they won't get a job. And so
this, of course, makes them leave Poland. Leave Poland to scholars who have very, very clear one agenda, which is a very nationalistic one.
And I don't call them as scholars anymore because they usually work in institutions which they are not competing for funds. They are getting funds from the government to write what the government wants them to write. They are no longer humanists. I call them simply employees of the state dispatched on to the fields of history.
Yeah. Professor Jan Grabowski, this was really only an introduction, I think, this talk to a much, much deeper talk that we all need to have, not only here at the INSS, but also in other, not only in research institutes, but in schools, I think. This is where it all starts, right? In the family, in schools, education systems. We see it later afterwards, translated into the politics, but I really think that it all begins in the education. I am really, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your views with us on this. This was, I think, one of the most important podcasts that I've ever done in the INSS, and I really thank you for this opportunity to listen to your voice and hear in your voice what you are experiencing as a Holocaust historian, leading historian in this field. This is really impossible to understand what is going on right now. It really reached violent scale, and I think.
Unfortunately, Avi, you are right, and I want to thank you very much for for having me here. And it's wonderful to have an audience like yours. And I'm certain we're going to come back to discuss these issues. Just we need to be vigilant all the time. Unfortunately,
I really agree, and I am looking forward for the next podcast with you. Professor Jan Grabowski, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for our viewers and listeners around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much.